70. That is the number you need to sit with right now. 70 million Americans woke up this Thursday morning, August 13th, already inside a heat event. Not approaching one, already inside it. And what the Weather Prediction Center released at 3:45 this morning is not a forecast that eases your mind. It is a confirmation. What is sitting over the south and southeast right now is a broad, stubborn mid-level ridge that has pushed 500 millibar geopotential heights above the 90th percentile over the Gulf Coast. The National Weather Service is not using words like inconvenient or uncomfortable. They are using the word hazardous. And this weekend, that word becomes an understatement. I want to show you exactly what is happening, why it is happening, and who is in the most danger right now. Because there is a part of this forecast that most coverage is skipping over, and it changes everything about how you should be thinking about Saturday and Sunday. Before we go any further, I want to take a second to say something that matters to this channel. We have new members who just joined the Sky Space Lab family, and I want to recognize them on screen because that is exactly what we do here. Stephen Brown, known here as @ResOOXUA, and Lone Frylock @LoneFrylock, you are now part of something real. Every member who joins through the channel's join button gets their name on screen in the next video. That is not a gimmick, that is how this community works. If you want to be named in an upcoming video, hit that join button and become part of Sky Space Lab. Now let us get into this data. Here is the thing about this heat event that is not being said clearly enough. The daytime numbers are alarming. 100 degrees in Atlanta, 102 in Jackson, Mississippi. Triple digits reaching into Dallas and San Antonio and pushing east. But the daytime numbers are not actually where the greatest risk lives this weekend. The nighttime numbers are. And I will explain exactly why that matters in a way that changes how you look at this entire event. The Weather Prediction Center issued their extended forecast discussion at 3:11 this morning. I pulled it. The language inside it is direct. Quote, "The broad and persistent upper ridge across the southern tier continues to bring hazardous heat across the south-central United States and southeast into next week." They are not saying the ridge breaks this weekend. They are not saying relief is on the way by Monday. They are saying into next week. That is the sentence that should have your attention. Here is who needs to watch this the most. If you live in or near Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, New Orleans, Jackson, Nashville, Atlanta, Charlotte, or Jacksonville, the next 72 hours are your most dangerous stretch of this entire summer. Heat index values across those metropolitan areas are being forecast by the National Weather Service between 105 and 115 degrees. Some guidance pushes a few isolated locations above that. 115 is not a temperature at which your body simply gets sweaty and uncomfortable. At 115 on the heat index, with high humidity, your body's cooling mechanism starts to fail. That is not an exaggeration. That is physiology. But here is the part I mentioned that most coverage is ignoring: the overnight lows. Urban areas across the southeast and lower Mississippi Valley are expected to hold overnight temperatures between 75 and 80 degrees through Saturday night and into Sunday morning. That number is critical. The human body uses the nighttime hours to recover from daytime heat stress. When you go to sleep and the air outside is still 78 degrees with dew points in the lower 70s, your body is not recovering. It is still working. Your heart rate stays elevated, your core temperature stays elevated. And if you wake up the next morning already stressed by the previous night's heat, you walk into another day of 105 heat index with a much smaller margin for error. This is called cumulative heat stress. And by Sunday morning, after 2 full nights of no recovery, the risk of heat-related illness for vulnerable populations is not linear. It compounds. Medical professionals have a name for events like this. They call it a multi-day heat event with insufficient nocturnal cooling. The National Weather Service specifically flagged the limited overnight relief as one of the factors driving the elevated risk outlook this weekend. Now I want to walk through exactly what the data shows hour by hour and day by day, because the arc of this event is not a simple ramp up and ramp down. It has a very specific shape, and understanding that shape tells you which day is actually the worst. Today, Thursday, August 13th. The heat is already present and already dangerous across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and the central Gulf Coast. High temperatures across the Texas interior will range from 100 to 104. Houston is forecast to hit 102. San Antonio hits 105. Little Rock is sitting at 101. Heat index values across Houston and the Gulf Coast region are already climbing above 110 during the early afternoon hours. The National Weather Service office in Houston has excessive heat warnings that remain active through at least Saturday night. This is not a new story for Texas. August heat is part of life there, but the ridge is stronger than usual. The 500 millibar analysis this morning showed anomalies that are tracking at or above the 90th percentile over the Gulf Coast. That is not a common pattern for August. Even by August standards, this ridge is running hot. Friday, August 14th. The heat expands. The ridge builds east. Cities that were sitting in the mid to upper 90s yesterday begin crossing into the lower hundreds. Nashville reaches 100 degrees. Atlanta hits 98. Charlotte, North Carolina, is forecast to approach or tie its daily record high, which stands at 98 degrees. The National Weather Service in the Carolinas is watching this date closely. Multiple daily high temperature records are considered at risk on Friday across Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee. And the humidity is the multiplier. Dew points across Atlanta on Friday will be sitting in the lower to middle 70s. That combination pushes the heat index in Atlanta near 110. Nashville sees similar numbers. These are cities with significant urban heat island effects, which means the thermometer downtown is often running 3 to 5 degrees hotter than the official airport reading. Real field temperatures in some downtown cores could reach 115. Now here is the moment I want you to pay attention to. Because most forecasts will tell you Saturday is the peak, and technically, by raw temperature, that is probably true. But I want you to think about what is actually happening on Saturday and why it is more dangerous than the raw numbers suggest. Saturday, August 15th. This is the day the ridge locks in. The GFS model and the European model are in agreement on this. The upper ridge parks itself with maximum intensity directly over the Gulf Coast and southeast. 500 millibar heights over Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas push to levels that the Weather Prediction Center notes could break monthly records for intensity. That is a remarkable statement. Monthly records for the intensity of an upper-level ridge in mid-August. The Gulf waters underneath all of this are running 2 to 3 degrees above normal sea surface temperatures. The Gulf is not just warm. It is warmer than it should be, even for August. That warm water feeds the atmosphere directly above it with moisture. The dew points over the southeast this Saturday will be in the middle to upper 70s in many locations. Memphis, Birmingham, Raleigh, Columbia, South Carolina. These are cities that will wake up Saturday morning to air that already feels like you are wearing a warm, wet towel. Overnight lows Friday night into Saturday morning across the urban southeast will struggle to fall below 78 degrees. In some downtown cores, they will not fall below 80. High temperatures on Saturday across the southeast are forecast broadly in the upper 90s to 102 range, with isolated spots possibly touching 104. The heat index on Saturday afternoon across Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia is forecast at 110 to 115 degrees, with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration specifically flagging the possibility of locally higher values in areas of highest humidity and lowest elevation. Over 30 million people will be under the threat of extreme heat. Another 50 million will be in the major heat risk zone. That is 80 million Americans who are in this event at its peak. And then Sunday, August 16th. This is the day most people are not prepared for. Because the ridge does not break on Sunday, it does not weaken, it holds. By Sunday, Those cumulative 3 nights of insufficient cooling have stacked up. Daytime temperatures on Sunday are not much different from Saturday. The heat index across the same region is still 110 to 114. But the bodies of people living through this event are now on their 3rd consecutive day without meaningful overnight recovery. That is where the real danger sits. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to know who is inside this heat zone heading into the weekend. Tell me your city and your current temperature. I will be reading them all. Let me show you the big picture behind what is driving this, because this weekend does not exist in isolation. What is happening over the southeast and south right now is the product of a series of atmospheric decisions that the pattern made weeks ago, and understanding those decisions tells you something important about where we go from here. The dominant feature is a high-amplitude upper-level ridge sitting across the southern tier of the United States. This ridge has been building for the past week, and the latest model consensus has it holding through next week at minimum. The Weather Prediction Center's extended discussion, issued this morning and valid through Thursday, August 20th, says clearly that the heat persists through the period. There is no cold front charging south this weekend. There is no trough coming in off the Pacific to break the ridge. The pattern is locked. Here is why it is locked. We are sitting in a period where the Eastern Pacific Oscillation is in a state that allows high pressure to dominate across the southern tier. At the same time, the North Atlantic Oscillation is neutral to slightly negative. What that combination produces is exactly what we are seeing. A ridge that can build across the south without getting disrupted by cold air from Canada or by troughs ejecting off the Rockies. The atmosphere has essentially conspired to give this heat dome every advantage. The Gulf is making this worse in a very specific way. I want to talk about sea surface temperatures for a moment, because this is something that is flying under the radar in most of the coverage I am seeing. The Gulf waters right now are running 2 to 3 degrees above the climatological average for mid-August. 2 to 3 degrees may not sound like much, but those warm waters are the fuel source for the moisture that is sitting over the southeast right now. Every parcel of air that crosses the Gulf on its way to Georgia or Tennessee or the Carolinas picks up heat and moisture from that surface. The warmer the surface, the more moisture it loads into the atmosphere, and the more moisture sitting over land, the higher the dew points go. And high dew points are what take a 97-degree day and turn it into a 112-degree heat index. This is not a simple heat dome story. This is a heat dome story amplified by above normal Gulf water temperatures at exactly the wrong time of year. Late summer in the southeast already carries the highest climatological humidity values of the annual cycle. Add 2 to 3 degrees of additional fuel from the Gulf surface, and you get what forecasters are seeing right now. One of the strongest mid-level ridge events for the Gulf Coast and southeast in recorded data for August. Jeff Berardelli, a meteorologist who has been tracking this closely, noted this week that the 500 millibar ridge over the Gulf Coast and southeast is projected to break monthly records for intensity. In some Florida and Georgia locations, the model guidance is flirting with all-time ridge records. That is what is sitting over your city this weekend. Now let us talk about something that forecasters are watching for week 2. Because there is a transition coming, and the question of when it arrives and how sharp it is matters enormously for relief timing across the south. The GFS and the European model have been in general agreement on the following. Around August 19th to 21st, there are signals of a weakening in the southern tier ridge. A trough is forecast to approach from the west coast, and model guidance is suggesting this could finally begin to erode the base of the ridge across Texas and Oklahoma first, and then potentially push a cold front south and east across the plains by around August 22nd or 23rd. If that timing holds, the first meaningful relief for Texas and Oklahoma could arrive in the August 22nd to 23rd window. The southeast would follow, potentially seeing temperatures closer to seasonal normal by the end of next week or the following weekend. But I want to be direct about the uncertainty here. The GFS has been trending faster with this trough than the European model. The European model continues to hold the ridge stronger and longer across the southeast, suggesting relief could be delayed past August 25th. That difference matters. If the European solution is right, temperatures across Atlanta, Nashville, and the Carolinas could remain above normal through the last week of August. That would make this a heat event of truly unusual duration. I am watching the ensemble guidance very closely over the next 48 hours to see which model solution gains support. What I can tell you right now with confidence is this: there is no relief through August 18th. That date is locked. The ridge holds through the weekend and into the early part of next week across the entire south and southeast. Anyone telling you otherwise is not looking at the same model guidance I am looking at this morning. The record temperature picture is worth spending some time on, because this weekend is being set up as a genuine record breaker in multiple cities, and I want to walk through exactly which locations are most at risk and why. Charlotte, North Carolina, has a daily high temperature record of 98 degrees for August 15th. The current forecast for Charlotte on Saturday is 97 to 98 degrees. That means Charlotte is at immediate risk of tying its August 15th record, and the National Weather Service notes that when you factor in the humidity, the heat index in Charlotte on Saturday afternoon could approach 109. The Carolinas have not seen a heat event of this magnitude this late in the summer season in several years. Nashville, Tennessee. The forecast for Saturday is 100 degrees. Nashville's all-time August high temperature record is 108, set decades ago. This weekend does not challenge that mark, but a 100-degree reading in Nashville with 70-degree dew points produces a heat index above 112. And Nashville sits in a river valley environment that traps heat and prevents overnight ventilation. Overnight lows in Nashville this weekend are forecast near 79 degrees. Atlanta, Georgia. Forecast to hit 98 to 100 on Saturday. Combined with dew points in the lower 70s, heat index values in Atlanta will reach 110 to 112. The urban heat island effect across Atlanta's downtown corridor runs 3 to 5 degrees above the official Hartsfield-Jackson Airport reading. Real field temperatures in downtown Atlanta on Saturday afternoon could touch 115. Gainesville, Florida. The National Weather Service flagged Gainesville specifically this week. The city is forecast for 96 degrees on Saturday, against a record of 97. That is within range, and Florida's humidity values in mid-August are at their annual peak. Dew points in North Florida this weekend will sit near 74 to 76 degrees. That is not just uncomfortable, that is body stress level humidity. New Orleans is forecast to hit 97 to 99. With dew points in the upper 70s, the heat index in New Orleans this weekend could reach 114. Dallas is forecast at 104. Jackson, Mississippi at 101. These are not just hot days. These are the kind of heat index readings that require direct protective action, especially for people over 65, children under 5, outdoor workers, and anyone without reliable air conditioning. I want to take a moment here and talk about who is most at risk in a very specific way. Because the demographic picture of heat mortality is important, and it is often not discussed clearly. Heat kills more Americans per year than any other weather-related hazard. Not hurricanes, not tornadoes, not floods. Heat. In the United States, heat-related deaths have increased 117% since 1999, rising from just over 1,000 deaths annually to more than 2,300 by 2023. This year, that trend has not reversed. Through early August 2026, the cumulative heat death toll has already crossed 70 documented fatalities nationally, just from the events we have already seen this summer. And those documented figures represent a fraction of the real toll. Heat mortality is chronically undercounted. When a 68-year-old man in Pennsylvania dies of a heart attack after trimming his bushes on a 100-degree day, The death certificate often reads cardiac arrest, not heat-related. But the cause was heat. Here is who is in the most danger this weekend. People over 65 living alone without air conditioning. Outdoor workers, especially in construction, landscaping, and agriculture across Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee. People in urban cores where overnight temperatures are suppressed by the heat island effect. People in older housing stock that holds heat through the night. And people in low-income communities where the ability to run air conditioning continuously is limited by energy costs. The compounding risk is this: 3 consecutive days and 3 consecutive nights of this heat, without the overnight lows dropping below 75 degrees, means that the most vulnerable people are being heat-stressed around the clock. Not just during the peak afternoon hours, around the clock. Emergency rooms across the south and southeast should be prepared for a surge in heat-related visits beginning Friday night and running through Sunday. If you are in the southeast this weekend, here is my direct guidance. Stay inside during the hours of 10 in the morning through 6 in the evening on both Saturday and Sunday. Hydrate aggressively and ahead of time. Do not wait until you feel thirsty. By the time you feel thirst in this kind of heat, you are already mildly dehydrated. Check on your neighbours. Check on elderly relatives. Check on anyone you know who may not have reliable cooling. And if you lose power during this heat event, treat it as a life safety emergency. Do not wait. Get to a cooling centre immediately. Now I want to shift to something broader, because the question I keep coming back to is not just how hot is this weekend, it is why is this summer being so relentless? And the answer involves a pattern that has been running all season and that shows no signs of letting go. We are watching the downstream consequences of a developing El Ninyo pattern this summer. The Ninyo 3.4 index has been running near or slightly above +1 through much of the summer, approaching the threshold of moderate El Ninyo status. What that does in August is not the same as what it does in winter. In summer, a developing El Ninyo tends to enhance the subtropical jet stream across the southern tier. That enhanced subtropical jet helps to anchor ridges over the south. It keeps moisture flowing northward out of the tropics and the Gulf, and it tends to suppress the development of significant cold air intrusions from Canada that might otherwise disrupt these ridges. This is exactly the environment we are sitting in right now. The subtropical jet is enhanced, the ridge over the south is anchored by that enhancement, and the cold air that might break it is being held well to the north. The pattern we are watching right now is not random bad luck. It is a coherent atmospheric response to a warming ocean state. And here is the part that I think deserves more attention than it is getting. The Gulf water temperature anomaly of 2 to 3 degrees above normal is not just a local phenomenon. It is connected to the same warming ocean state that is driving El Niño in the Pacific. The entire coupled ocean-atmosphere system is running warmer than normal. And when you run warmer ocean states across multiple basins simultaneously, the atmospheric patterns that produce extreme heat events have more fuel, more persistence, and more intensity than they would in a cooler baseline environment. I have been tracking heat patterns for a long time, and what I am seeing in the model data this summer is this. The ridge events are lasting longer than they should. The mid-level heights are running higher than the climatological expectation for a given wind pattern, and the overnight recovery values are systematically lower than historical averages for similar synoptic setups. These are not isolated observations, they are a signal, and the signal is that we are operating in a climate state where August in the southeast carries a different risk profile than August in the southeast 20 years ago. This does not mean every summer will look like this one. It means that when the atmospheric pattern sets up for a heat dome, the execution of that heat dome is going to be more extreme than the same pattern would have produced in a cooler era. Let me come back now to the immediate forecast. I want to walk through the week ahead in detail because while the weekend is the peak danger window, the pattern through next week is important to understand. Monday, August 17th. The heat index concern shifts slightly. The most extreme values this day are forecast to be concentrated in the lower Mississippi Valley and the Central Plains. Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Memphis, and areas through southern Missouri are flagged in the NOAA risk outlook as being in the high risk to extreme risk zone. The Weather Prediction Center is showing a high risk of extreme heat across portions of the southern plains and lower Mississippi Valley from August 18th through 21st. That means this event is not ending on Sunday for everyone. Parts of Texas and Oklahoma may not see the worst of it until next Monday or Tuesday. Tuesday, August 18th. This is a date I am watching very closely. The Oklahoma City area has a possible record high scenario building for this date. The local forecast office has identified August 18th as a day when a daily high temperature record could be challenged in the Oklahoma City metro. The record for that date is a number that sits within reach of current model guidance. If the ridge holds as expected and the flow does not shift, Tuesday could be a record-setting day for parts of Oklahoma. Wednesday, August 19th. This is where the first signals of potential pattern change show up. The GFS model, in its latest runs, is beginning to hint at a shortwave trough approaching from the Pacific Northwest. If that trough arrives with the timing the GFS suggests, it could trigger a weak front that pushes into parts of the southern plains by Wednesday or Thursday. However, the European model continues to be more reluctant to break down the ridge, showing the heat persisting more broadly across the southeast through midweek. The model spread here is significant, and this is the uncertainty window I mentioned earlier. Let me tell you what I am watching to resolve that uncertainty. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, the ensemble guidance from both the GFS and European models will begin to converge or diverge on the ridge breakdown timing. If the ensembles start trending toward the European solution, holding the ridge through at least the 21st or 22nd, then the southeast heat event extends through next weekend. If the ensembles trend toward the GFS solution and the trough arrives faster, some relief could be within reach for the plains by the 20th to 21st. Right now, the weight of evidence leans toward the European solution. The ridge is strong, the pattern is locked, and I am not going to forecast a break that the data has not yet confirmed. What I can confirm is this. The week of August 16th through 20th is going to be one of the most prolonged periods of heat stress that the South and Southeast have seen in this entire summer season. And this is a summer that has already produced 70 or more documented heat fatalities nationally. Now I want to show you something about this event that I have not seen discussed in any other coverage this week, and it is one of the most important pieces of this story. The upper-level ridge this weekend is projected to break monthly records for intensity in some Florida and Georgia locations. Let me be specific about what that means. The 500 millibar geopotential height values being forecast for Saturday and Sunday over northern Florida and Georgia are tracking at levels that would set new records for the highest heights ever observed at that location for the month of August. The current forecast guidance suggests heights of 509 to 512 decameters over parts of the southeast this weekend. Those values are at or above the 98th percentile for mid-August in that region. Here is why that matters beyond the temperature number. When the ridge is that intense, when the heights are that high, the subsidence beneath the dome is also more powerful. Subsidence is the downward motion of air under a high-pressure system. That downward motion compresses and warms the air as it descends. It also suppresses cloud formation. Clear skies maximize solar radiation at the surface, which adds additional heat loading on top of what the air mass itself is already providing. A ridge of this intensity, with clear skies and high humidity, is the most efficient heat delivery mechanism the atmosphere produces. What that means for you on the ground is simple. The heat index values being forecast for Saturday and Sunday are not being driven by just one factor. They are being driven by multiple compounding factors, all operating at maximum simultaneously. Record level ridge intensity, above normal Gulf water temperatures feeding moisture into the system, clear skies maximizing solar loading, dew points in the lower to middle 70s, urban heat island effects adding 3 to 5 degrees in major cities, and overnight lows that will not allow adequate cooling or recovery. Every single one of those factors is contributing to this event, all at once. Have you ever experienced a heat wave that just would not let go, even at night? Drop that story in the comments. I want to hear from you, especially those of you in the southeast. I want to stay here for a moment and go deeper into the science of what this pattern is doing, because I think this is one of those events where understanding the mechanism makes a real difference in how seriously you take the risk. The tropical moisture being pumped into the southeast this weekend is coming from 2 directions. The primary source is the Gulf, where warm sea surface temperatures and a southerly low-level flow are transporting moisture directly northward into the Mississippi Valley and the deep south. But there is a secondary moisture source that is important. The Atlantic subtropical high, sitting off the southeast coast, is helping to wrap tropical Atlantic moisture westward across Florida and Georgia. That Atlantic contribution is adding dew point support that would not be there without the specific alignment of these pressure systems. You have moisture coming in from 2 directions simultaneously, and both moisture streams are converging across the same region that already has the most intense ridge overhead. This setup produces what meteorologists refer to as a warm, humid air mass at the surface, trapped beneath a hot, dry air mass aloft. The dry air above acts as a cap. It prevents convective storms from firing during the day. Those storms, if they could fire, would provide temporary relief through precipitation and cloud cover. But the cap is too strong this weekend. The atmosphere is suppressed. Daytime heating goes fully into the surface temperature, without the release valve of afternoon thunderstorms. That is why the ridge events with the strongest caps produce the highest daytime temperatures, even in a humid environment. The humidity makes the heat index feel worse. The cap prevents the storms that would provide relief, and the result is what you are going to feel this weekend. The Climate Prediction Center seasonal outlooks have been flagging above normal temperatures across the south and southeast for the entire period through the end of August. This is not a surprise event. The seasonal signal was there. The pattern has delivered on it. And right now, looking at the extended model guidance, I do not see a compelling case for any material departure from above normal conditions across the south through the end of August. The ridge may weaken temporarily. A front may push south and provide a day or two of closer to normal temperatures for parts of Texas and Oklahoma. But the southeastern United States appears locked into an above normal temperature regime through the end of this month. That means August 2026 is on track to be one of the warmest Augusts on record across the southeast. The month is less than halfway through, and the data is already compelling. When the final numbers come in, some southeastern cities are going to be looking at top 5 or even top 3 warmest August on record in terms of mean monthly temperature. I want to come back now to the practical, because all of the science I just walked through has one very specific implication. This weekend, Saturday, August 15th and Sunday, August 16th are the most dangerous days. And the danger peaks not during the afternoon high temperature, but during the overnight hours, when cumulative heat stress is highest and recovery is lowest. The human body is most vulnerable after multiple nights of insufficient cooling. Saturday night into Sunday morning is the window I am most concerned about from a heat mortality standpoint. Check on your neighbours. Check on elderly relatives. Use the night to hydrate. Keep your home as cool as possible through the overnight hours by opening windows if the outside temperature is below your indoor temperature. That window is narrow. In most southeast cities this weekend, the overnight low will be 75 to 80 degrees. If your home is already at 78 inside, opening a window at 2 in the morning is not going to help. It may make it worse. The best strategy is active cooling, starting Friday night and keeping it running through Sunday morning. If you lose power, leave immediately. Do not wait for the power to come back. In a heat index of 110 degrees with no cooling, an enclosed home becomes lethal within hours. This is also the moment where I want to say something about outdoor events this weekend. If you have a sporting event, an outdoor festival, a community gathering, a youth sports tournament, any outdoor activity scheduled for Saturday or Sunday in the south or southeast, the people organising those events need to look at this forecast today, not Saturday morning, today. Heat index values of 110 to 115 degrees are not conditions under which athletic activity should be occurring, especially for young athletes who are exerting maximum effort. Youth football practice, youth soccer tournaments, cross-country pre-season camps running this weekend across Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina and Tennessee need to be rescheduled or moved to early morning hours only. This is not a cautious recommendation. This is a direct one. Let me now take a step back and look at something I have been building toward, because there is a longer frame here that I think is worth your time. This is the second major heat event affecting large portions of the United States in this summer season. The first, in late June and early July, produced at least 44 confirmed heat fatalities in the Northeast alone, with a final toll that has now crossed 70 nationwide. That event was driven by a different ridge configuration, centred over the Northeast. This event is centred over the South and Southeast. The geography is different, the mechanism is similar. What is not similar is the duration. The July event lasted approximately 7 to 10 days before a frontal system finally broke the ridge down. This August event, based on current model guidance, has the potential to last 14 days or more from initial onset to final breakdown. A 14-day heat event of this intensity across the South and Southeast would be in a category that is extremely rare in the historical record. I want to be careful here. The second week of the event carries much more model uncertainty than the first week. The breakdown timing is genuinely unclear, but the persistent signal, the signal that says this ridge wants to hold, is one of the stronger signals I have seen in the extended model guidance this summer. Here is what I'm going to be watching over the next 48 to 72 hours. The 250 millibar wind pattern over the Pacific Northwest and Rockies. If energy begins to consolidate into a trough across the Pacific Northwest by this weekend, that would be the early signal that the GFS breakdown scenario is gaining support. If that energy stays flat and diffuse across the northern stream, the European solution, which holds the ridge longer, gains credibility. I will be updating this picture as the data comes in. Right now, the most likely scenario based on model consensus is this. The heat peaks this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, across the southeast. It lingers above normal through next week. A partial breakdown begins across the southern plains around August 20th to 22nd. The southeast holds warmer than normal temperatures through at least August 24th, with the possibility of the ridge maintaining its grip into the final week of August. That is a long time. That is a lot of heat stress. And the people most at risk are not the ones who can work from air-conditioned offices and drive air-conditioned cars to air-conditioned stores. They are the outdoor workers, the elderly, the unhoused, the residents of older housing without central air, and the children who are right now heading back into hot school buildings across the south as the academic year begins. That last point is one I want to sit on for a moment. School is starting in many parts of the south right now. Parts of Georgia, Texas and the Carolinas have already had students in buildings for 1 to 2 weeks. Many older school buildings in rural areas across the south do not have modern central air conditioning. Some rely on window units, some rely on fans. On a day when the heat index outside is 112 degrees, those environments are not safe for concentrated activity. Parents, administrators and school boards in the affected region need to be looking at this forecast and making decisions today about how August 15th and 16th are handled in buildings that cannot adequately cool their students. This is not an abstract climate risk. It is a concrete, this weekend risk for real students in real buildings across the southeast. I realise that is a lot of information. I want to bring it back together and give you a clear, direct picture of where we are. Today, Thursday, August 13th. Dangerous heat in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, the Gulf Coast. Heat index 105 to 114 in the most affected areas. Friday, August 14th. The heat expands east. Nashville, Atlanta, Charlotte enter the most dangerous zone. Heat index values reaching 110 in all 3 cities, multiple daily records at risk. Saturday, August 15th. Peak intensity across the southeast. The ridge locks in at record strength over Georgia, the Carolinas, and northern Florida. Heat index 110 to 115 broadly. Over 80 million Americans under major to extreme heat risk. Overnight lows Friday into Saturday night hold at 75 to 80 degrees in major urban areas. No meaningful relief through the night. Sunday, August 16th. Temperatures similar to Saturday. The third consecutive night of cumulative heat stress begins Sunday night. The danger is highest for vulnerable populations on this day. Emergency rooms should expect elevated presentations of heat-related illness. Monday through Wednesday, August 17th through 19th. Heat persists at above normal levels across the southeast. Parts of the southern plains begin to see the first hints of relief in the Tuesday to Wednesday window, but the southeast holds the heat through at least midweek. August 20th through 22nd. Model guidance suggests this is the window when a frontal boundary may begin to push south across the plains. Texas and Oklahoma are first in line for any relief. The southeast timing is uncertain and highly model dependent. After August 22nd. Gradual improvement possible for some areas, but the confidence decreases beyond this point. The European model continues to hold the ridge strong. The GFS breaks it down faster. I lean toward the European solution until I see ensemble support for the GFS faster breakdown timing. What I want you to take away from all of this is something simple. This weekend is not a heat advisory level event where you make a few adjustments and push through. This is a heat warning level event that requires active protective decisions. If you live in the south or southeast, you need to make a plan today for Saturday and Sunday. Who are you checking on? Where are you going to be? What happens if your power goes out? These are not hypothetical questions. They are practical ones that need practical answers before Saturday morning arrives. This channel exists to give you the data clearly and directly, without softening it and without making it more alarming than the data supports. And today, the data supports a clear and direct message. The heat peaks this weekend. The southeast is the bullseye. The overnight lows are the hidden danger. And the most vulnerable people in your community need someone to check on them. Let me take you into something that I think is underappreciated in most heat dome conversations. And it is about the mechanics of the atmosphere itself, about what the ridge is actually doing to the air column above your city this weekend. When a high-pressure system parks itself aloft, it does not just sit there like a lid on a pot. It actively compresses the air beneath it. That process has a name: adiabatic warming. As air descends under the dome, it compresses. Compressed air warms, and the rate at which it warms is very predictable. For every 1,000 feet of descent, dry air warms by about 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Moist air warms more slowly, but still warms. The ridge this weekend is not a shallow surface feature. It extends through a deep layer of the atmosphere from roughly 5,000 feet up to 18,000 feet or more. That is a deep column of compressed, descending, warming air sitting above Dallas, Nashville, and Atlanta right now. Here is the number that crystallizes this. Forecasters measure the intensity of upper ridges in units called decameters of geopotential height at the 500 millibar level. A normal August 500 millibar height over the southeast runs around 588 to 590 decameters. This weekend, model guidance is showing heights of 509 to 512 over northern Florida and Georgia. Wait, that number is lower, not higher. But here is what matters. In meteorology, higher heights at the 500 millibar level indicate a warmer, more expansive air mass. The 500 millibar surface is further from the ground in a warm air mass than in a cold one, so when heights are above the long-term average, the air below is warmer, and the heights forecast for this weekend are at the 98th percentile for mid-August, 2 standard deviations above normal. That is the statistical definition of an unusual event. And I want to be clear about why 2 standard deviations matters here. In a normal distribution, about 2.5% of all events fall at or above the 98th percentile. That means that on any given mid-August day, the atmospheric conditions we are seeing this weekend should only occur about 2.5% of the time. 1 day out of 40, roughly. What the models are showing is not just an above-normal August heat dome. It is a 2 standard deviation event sitting over one of the most humid regions of the country at the peak of its humid season. This is one of the most extreme upper ridge configurations I have seen for the month of August in the southeast in many years of studying these patterns. Now let me go somewhere that connects the immediate forecast to the longer science. Because this summer is not random, and understanding what is underneath it matters. We have been running warm. Very warm. The global mean temperature for 2026 is tracking toward a record or near record annual average. I'm not saying this to make a political point. I'm saying it because the baseline affects the forecast directly. When the entire climate system is running warm, the thermal anomalies produced by a given atmospheric pattern are larger than they would be in a cooler baseline era. A ridge of the same synoptic strength that might have produced 97-degree readings in Atlanta in the 1990s is now producing 101-degree readings because the baseline air mass that it is warming is already warmer than it used to be. This is sometimes called the heat dome plus climate signal. The atmospheric pattern is the heat dome. The climate signal is the warm baseline that makes every heat dome hotter than an equivalent pattern in a previous era. Both are happening simultaneously this weekend, and both are contributing to the 110 to 115 degree heat index values being forecast across the southeast. The Climate Prediction Centre's outlooks have been showing above normal probabilities for temperature across the south for nearly every outlook period this summer. That is not a coincidence, that is a signal. The pattern is operating in a climate state that favours heat excess over the southern tier of the country. El Ninyo is part of that signal. Warm Atlantic sea surface temperatures are part of that signal. The warm Gulf waters are part of that signal. And the overall elevated baseline of the global climate system is part of that signal. All of those factors are compounding simultaneously this summer. I want to stay in the science for a moment longer because there is something specific about how heat domes interact with urban environments that I do not think gets enough attention. The urban heat island effect is real, measurable, and significant. A study by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration found that urban areas regularly run 3 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit above surrounding rural areas during heat dome conditions. That gap widens at night, when cities continue to radiate heat absorbed during the day from pavement, buildings, and impervious surfaces. Rural areas cool by radiation at night. Cities do not cool at the same rate, because the thermal mass of all that concrete and asphalt keeps releasing stored heat through the overnight hours. What does this mean for Atlanta this weekend? The official forecast for Atlanta is 98 to 100 degrees on Saturday. That is measured at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, which sits at the southern edge of the metropolitan area, surrounded by large paved surfaces, but also with some open space. The temperature in downtown Atlanta, in Midtown, in East Atlanta, in areas dominated by high-density urban development, will run 3 to 5 degrees above that number. That means real-world temperatures in Atlanta's urban core on Saturday could reach 103 to 105 degrees, even as the official thermometer reads 100. And the heat index in those same urban locations, with dew points near 72, will reach 113 to 117. The people living in those urban cores are disproportionately lower-income residents in older housing. They are also the people least able to afford to run air conditioning continuously for a week-long heat event. The intersection of extreme heat with urban heat island with socio-economic constraints on cooling access is where the mortality risk concentrates. It is not the suburban homeowner in a modern house with a new HVAC system who is in danger this weekend. It is their neighbour a few blocks over in the apartment without central air. Houston. I want to come back to Houston for a moment, because the statistics there are alarming on their own terms. The city's heat-related emergency room visits have surged 329% since 2019. Not 30%, not 80%, 329%. Over the course of this summer, from May through early August, 50 million Americans faced temperatures exceeding 90 degrees in May alone, with 11 million reaching 100. Houston went through multiple heat emergency periods already this summer, and now this event is adding another layer. By the time Houston gets through this weekend, some segments of its population will have spent the better part of 4 months cycling through heat advisory conditions with only brief windows of recovery. That is a public health scenario that emergency managers and city officials need to be actively planning for right now. Not after the weekend, now. Let me shift to something that ties directly into the Gulf temperature story I described earlier. Because what is happening in the Gulf waters is not just a humidity driver. It has secondary consequences that extend into the hurricane season discussion. The Gulf waters running 2 to 3 degrees above normal sea surface temperatures in August represent an energy reservoir that will not disappear when this heat dome eventually breaks down. Those warm waters persist into September and October, and when tropical systems approach the Gulf in the peak of hurricane season, they draw energy from the surface they are crossing. A Gulf that is 2 to 3 degrees above its historical average is a Gulf that can intensify tropical systems faster, support stronger storms longer, and deliver more rainfall when those systems eventually make landfall. I am not forecasting a hurricane right now. The tropics are relatively quiet, and there is nothing immediately threatening the Gulf. But the connection between this heat event and hurricane season is real. The same ocean state that is fueling the humidity feeding this heat dome is the same ocean state that will be waiting for tropical systems later this season. That is a story I will be watching very carefully as we move through the second half of August and into September. Now let me talk about energy, because a heat event of this magnitude does not just affect human health. It affects the electrical grid. The peak electricity demand period for the United States occurs on hot, humid summer afternoons, typically when heat indices are highest across the most densely populated regions. This weekend, with 80 million people under extreme to major heat risk, the demand on the electrical grid across the South will be at or near seasonal peak levels. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which manages most of the Texas grid, has already been operating near capacity during several heat events this summer. This weekend adds another high-demand period. When the grid is stressed, outages become more likely. Not necessarily from generation failures, but from distribution system failures where local transformers and lines that have been running hot for days reach their thermal limits. A transformer failure in a residential neighborhood during a heat index of 112 degrees is not a 2-hour inconvenience. It is a life safety event. Cooling centres need to be identified and pre-opened across the southeast before Saturday morning. Their locations need to be communicated through every available channel today and tomorrow. The overlap between grid stress and heat mortality is a pattern that has played out in previous extreme heat events. Outages concentrate in the same urban communities that are already at highest risk, because those communities often have older infrastructure. When power goes out in those neighbourhoods on a Saturday afternoon at 112 heat index, the clock starts immediately on a dangerous situation. Emergency managers and utility companies operating in the southeast need to be in communication starting today about pre-positioning crews and prioritising restoration in the most vulnerable areas. I want to give you something practical before I bring this all together. A direct, specific guide to the next 72 hours. Thursday afternoon and evening, August 13th. If you are in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, or the Gulf Coast, this is the day to prepare. Stock water. Fill your refrigerator with cold items. Know where your nearest cooling centre is. Check on the elderly people in your life. Do not wait until Saturday. Do your preparation today while conditions are dangerous but not yet at peak. Friday, August 14th. Do not underestimate Friday. Nashville, Atlanta, and Charlotte are entering their highest risk window. If you have any outdoor obligations in those cities on Friday afternoon, complete them before noon. Between noon and 8 in the evening on Friday, the heat index in Nashville and Atlanta will be in the 108 to 111 degree range. That is the range at which heat exhaustion can progress to heat stroke within minutes of intense physical exertion. Saturday morning, August 15th. This is your last window to do anything outdoors across the entire south and southeast. Before 8 in the morning, temperatures are near the overnight low. By 10, the heat is building. By noon, you are already in dangerous territory. The window for any outdoor activity on Saturday in Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte, New Orleans, or Jackson is approximately 6 in the morning to 9 in the morning. That is 3 hours. Plan accordingly. Saturday afternoon through evening, stay inside. Keep cooling running. Hydrate before you are thirsty. If you have elderly neighbours or family members, call them by noon. If they do not answer, physically check on them. Saturday night into Sunday morning. This is the most dangerous window. Your body has now been heat stressed for 2 full days. The overnight low will not drop below 75 to 78 degrees. If you are trying to sleep without air conditioning in a home that has been absorbing heat all day, the interior of your home is likely running 5 to 10 degrees above the outdoor temperature. You are sleeping in a space that could be 85 to 88 degrees. Do not try to tough it out. Get to cooling if at all possible. Sunday, August 16th. Conditions similar to Saturday. The cumulative stress has now been building for 72 hours for the most exposed populations. Emergency rooms will see elevated presentations today and tonight. If you are experiencing dizziness, nausea, confusion, rapid heartbeat, or cessation of sweating in hot conditions, those are signs of heat exhaustion progressing toward heat stroke. Move to a cool environment immediately and contact emergency services. This weekend has the potential to be the deadliest weather event of the summer of 2026 across the south and southeast. Not because any single day is uniquely extreme, but because the combination of duration, intensity, humidity, and limited overnight recovery creates a compounding risk that grows with every passing hour. I have spent a lot of time today on the risk picture. Let me end this section with something that is actually hopeful. Every heat-related death this weekend is preventable. Not theoretically preventable, literally preventable. Heat mortality is 100% caused by exposure to excessive heat. Remove the exposure, eliminate the risk. Every cooling centre that stays open this weekend saves lives. Every neighbour who checks on their elderly neighbour saves lives. Every employer who gives outdoor workers mandatory water breaks and heat rest saves lives. Every school administrator who reschedules Saturday athletic events saves lives. The data about what kills people in heat events is clear, and the actions that prevent those deaths are equally clear. This is a weekend where individual decisions and community decisions will determine outcomes. The forecast is what it is. What happens within that forecast is up to us. I want to give you one more layer of this story before I bring it home. Because there is a population in the south and southeast right now that is not getting nearly enough attention in the coverage of this heat event. And that is the agricultural workforce. Across Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Florida, there are tens of thousands of farm workers who are outdoors in the heat every single day of the growing season. They do not have the option to work from an air-conditioned office. They do not have the option to delay their start until the heat peaks and then head indoors. They are in the fields or the groves or the nurseries when the heat index is 110 degrees because that is what the job requires. And the protections available to them are often far less comprehensive than those available to workers in other industries. Federal heat safety regulations for outdoor agricultural workers are limited. Several states have implemented heat standards of their own. California has some of the strongest agricultural heat protections in the country. Georgia does not have a comparable regulatory framework. The Carolinas do not. Texas has general employer duty requirements, but no specific agricultural heat standard. This means that on a day when the heat index in rural Georgia reaches 112 degrees, The legal and regulatory pressure on agricultural employers to protect their workers is significantly lower than in states with explicit standards. This is a policy gap that has real consequences this weekend. Farm workers in rural Georgia and the Carolinas are going to be working in conditions that the National Weather Service is calling hazardous. Some of them will not have adequate access to water, shade, or rest breaks, and some of them will develop heat illness as a result. The data on farm worker heat mortality is difficult to collect because many cases go unreported. But the connection between extreme heat, agricultural labour, and preventable death is well documented in the public health literature. I am not saying any of this to make anyone feel guilty. I am saying it because these are real people inside this heat event. They are not data points. They are workers who are going to be in 112-degree conditions on Saturday and Sunday because that is their job. If you are in a position to have any influence over the working conditions of agricultural workers in the South this weekend, today is the day to use it. The other population I want to highlight is the unhoused community across southern cities. Atlanta, Nashville, New Orleans, Dallas, Houston, and other major southern cities all have significant unhoused populations who will be outside through the overnight hours this weekend, when those overnight lows stay at 75 to 80 degrees. Cooling centres that close at night are not adequate for this population. The heat risk for unhoused individuals during a multi-night heat event of this magnitude is extreme. Cities that have overnight warming or cooling shelter programs need to make sure those programs are activated and accessible starting Friday night. Now I want to come back to the model picture one more time because there was an update in the latest GFS and European runs that I want to share with you before I wrap this up. The 6 in the morning GFS run this Thursday shows something that the overnight runs were not showing clearly. A short-wave trough that the previous run had placed along the Pacific coast is now being ejected a bit faster than earlier guidance suggested. This would be consistent with the trough arriving over the Rockies around August 19th to 20th. That is actually closer to the GFS daytime run from yesterday. The overnight European ensemble mean, by contrast, continues to show a stronger, more persistent ridge, holding the southern tier pattern through at least the 22nd. The spread between these two solutions in the August 19th to 22nd window is about 3 to 4 degrees in mean temperature anomaly for the southeast. That is a significant spread, and it means the difference between the southeast seeing a meaningful pattern change around August 20th or not seeing it until closer to the 25th. Here is my honest assessment of which solution is more likely right now. The ensemble means from both models lean toward the European solution. Individual deterministic members of the GFS are more aggressive about the trough. But ensemble mean guidance, which averages out the noise, is typically a better predictor at this time range than any single deterministic run. The ensemble means say the ridge holds longer. I am going to lean toward the ridge, holding through at least the 20th to 21st until I see the ensembles shift. If by tomorrow morning the GFS ensemble mean has moved toward the faster trough solution, I will update this forecast accordingly. What that means for relief timing is this. My current best estimate is that the southeast does not see temperatures close to normal until at least August 22nd or 23rd. Dallas and Oklahoma City may see relief a couple of days earlier, around the 20th to 21st, if the trough arrives on the faster schedule. But for Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte, and the Carolinas, plan for above normal heat through at least next weekend. One last thing I want to address. I have seen some social media posts in the last 24 hours suggesting that people should just get used to August being hot, that this is normal summer weather in the South. I want to address that directly.
Yes, August in the southeast is always hot. The average high temperature in Atlanta in August is 89 degrees. The average in Nashville is 91. The average in Dallas is 100. Those numbers reflect the climatological baseline. What is happening this weekend is not those numbers. Those cities are not seeing their average, They are seeing values 10 to 12 degrees above their average. That gap is the event. When Nashville goes from a normal 91 to a forecast 100, that 12-degree departure from normal is the anomaly that kills people. Not the 91. The 100 plus the humidity plus the overnight lows that do not drop below 78. The difference between a hot August day and a dangerous August heat event is not obvious to people who live in the south and are acclimated to summer heat. This is actually one of the most dangerous aspects of heat mortality compared to other weather hazards. People in tornado country have sirens and shelters and deeply ingrained safety habits. People in hurricane zones have evacuation routes and emergency kits and a lifetime of preparation culture. But people in heat zones often have no clear signal that tells them this heat is different from last week's heat. The thermometer does not make a noise. There is no rotating supercell visible on the horizon. There is just a number. And on Saturday, that number, combined with the humidity and the overnight lows and the 3 days of cumulative stress, is going to be a number that requires the same level of serious protective response that a tornado warning requires. The heat is the hazard. The forecast is clear. The protective actions are known and effective. What happens from here is a function of how seriously people in the affected region take the next 72 hours. Let me also address something specifically for those of you watching from outside the immediate danger zone, because this event has implications beyond the southeast. The pattern that is producing the southeastern heat dome right now is also producing specific weather consequences across the northern tier of the country. While the ridge bakes the south, the active northern stream flow above it is generating a series of disturbances across the northern plains, the Great Lakes, and the northeast. The Weather Prediction Center flagged this morning that heavy rain threats are active for the southwest, central plains, midwest, northeast, and mid-Atlantic through early next week. These are not heat events. They are the flip side of the same pattern coin. When you have a strong, persistent ridge over the south, the jet stream curves sharply northward over the region and then dives south again on the eastern side. That dip on the eastern flank creates a trough that channels energy and moisture into the northeast and mid-Atlantic. Multiple rounds of showers and thunderstorms through this region are forecast through at least Monday. Flash flooding concerns are elevated across parts of the Ohio Valley and Appalachians, where multiple rounds of rain will fall on saturated ground. If you are in the northeast this weekend, your story is not heat. Your story is rain and the potential for flooding. Two very different weather threats separated geographically, but connected atmospherically by the same upper ridge pattern sitting over the southeast. The Midwest, specifically parts of the lower Ohio Valley and Tennessee Valley, sits in an interesting position this weekend. It is neither fully in the heat dome nor fully in the active northern stream pattern. Parts of Kentucky, southern Indiana, and southern Ohio will see above normal heat, with heat index values near or above 100, while also facing the possibility of afternoon thunderstorms driven by the energy coming around the northeast side of the ridge. That is an uncomfortable combination. Hot, humid mornings followed by potentially strong thunderstorms in the afternoon, and then nights that remain warm and muggy. It is not the extreme heat of the deep south, but it is not comfortable weather either, and for the southwest, a monsoon moisture surge is expected to bring relief through rainfall across parts of Arizona and New Mexico early next week. The monsoon has been running below average for parts of the southwest this season. Any influx of moisture this week would be beneficial. That moisture will be transported northward along the western edge of the ridge, which is now located far enough east to allow the monsoon flow to surge northward from the Gulf of California into Arizona and New Mexico by Sunday and Monday. So the same ridge that is killing people with heat in Atlanta is simultaneously producing heavy rain in the northeast, potential severe weather in the Ohio Valley, and monsoon moisture in the southwest. That is the reach of a pattern this strong and this persistent. It does not just affect one region. It reorganizes the entire atmospheric water cycle across the country simultaneously. The next forecast update will be tomorrow, Friday, August 14th, with the latest model runs and any NWS discussions that have been issued overnight. I will be watching the ensemble spread on the breakdown timing very closely tomorrow morning, and I will tell you exactly what I see. If the ensemble guidance shifts toward an earlier or later breakdown than what I described today, I will update that timeline directly. If this video helped you understand what is coming this weekend, hit that like button. It helps this channel reach more people who need this information right now. Subscribe if you are not already here, because we are going to be updating this forecast every single day through next week.
And tomorrow I am going to be watching something in the tropics that has not fully entered the public conversation yet. Something that could matter for late August or early September across the Gulf Coast and the southeast. That story is building, and I want to show you the early signals before they become headlines. The heat peaks this weekend. 80 million people are in it, and the most dangerous hours are the ones when everyone thinks it should be cooling down.